Welcome to Live, Laugh, Shut the Fuck Up and Listen. I'm Katie Eades.
I'm Marissa Senzaki, and we are your strategic partners for evaluating personal and professional development trends.
Today's topic are personal values a currency or a compass? What is the real value of values anyway, Marissa?
Well, it's interesting because when we were chatting earlier, I like that you said, the word value is used as a currency. And so when we think about values as something personal, are we making it too transactional? Is it too binary and black and white? Because when we Googled the definition, it did say that it's a set of guiding principles and beliefs that help you differentiate between good and bad. But is it really that simple? And should we be looking at it as this black and white, good or bad?
Hmm. When I hear principles and beliefs, what I hear is this is our religion, because that's what
Hmm.
religion is. It's a set of principles and beliefs. And when you are religious, you don't violate your belief system and you don't vote against your belief system. You don't even oftentimes want to hang out without your belief system unless you're just trying to recruit new people in your belief system. And so
Hmm.
when I hear about values, particularly in the coaching space, they start to look a lot like this idea of a boundary, an ideal of a box that we put ourselves in. If I value freedom when I did this exercise, which means someone can take it away versus just knowing that I am freedom and that I light my own way. And if I see lights along the, compass along the way that says I don't have freedom here to be my own nature, then that's not for me. But that certainly isn't a box that I'm in where now I have to figure out how to get my freedom back. I can have it back that same day.
Hmm. And I don't know that we always know up front whether something matches or aligns with our values or not.
And what does that say about the value of values if we don't even know what they are until we do an exercise? We were talking before about nature versus nurture. Your nature is, the subconscious being formed in the womb. And your nature is the moment you're born with that beautiful personality that parents remember. Everything else is nurture. And arguably, you could say the nurture was happening in the womb with the food that mom ate and the environment she was in and the stress levels she had, and then dad's environment. And so, we are a synthesis of our nature versus nurture. And what does that mean we're valuing then? Are we valuing our nature? Are we valuing our nurture? Are we valuing the synthesis of the two? And are our values just a belief that holds us in a box?
The nature nurture is interesting. I don't think I thought about that previously when it comes to values, but I think it does kind of go back to things that I've learned about subconscious mind versus conscious mind. And there's this belief that, our subconscious will act in certain ways to get our needs met, and our conscious mind sometimes might act another way. People sometimes call this self sabotage. Other people might attribute this to procrastination. I think of it really as we have certain needs that we're looking to get met, and sometimes we don't know how to get that met on our own, and we're looking externally. If I say, like, I value connection, instead of connecting with myself and learning more about myself, I'm now looking like that means I must have a romantic partner, or I need to have lots of friends, or I'm looking for connection at work. So a lot of it too, I think, is how we define it. And everyone can define that differently.
Yeah. And so then what I hear then is that people just value words.
We do.
We do. And those words limit us. When we say limiting beliefs, what you're truly saying is limiting words. And I know that because
Mhm.
people will talk about a reframe and how that shifted their thinking. So I have a secret about habits that no one's written about. Once you know you're doing a habit, it's no longer unconscious, it's conscious. It's a choice. Like you're making a choice. So the subconscious, if you're aware of it, then it's not in your subconscious anymore.
Mhm.
It's here. And I think that part also we miss because back to valuing words. And should we value words? Are words just witchcraft? Now we're in a different place on values.
Well, going back to the currency part, I think the ways that personal values have seemed maybe a little bit icky to us is when it's been too much. You brought up the word boundaries. Like when people use that to set a boundary against other people. Can you tell me more about like how you've seen values misused in that way?
So when people say, my values are violated, I hear violated a lot. That's a really strong phrase. And that's where we start to then demand from others, like, you're violating my boundary. When you use this language, it violated my value of diversity, perhaps. What you're saying is that anyone can violate you versus I value myself. And again, with the wordsmithing, like you're just creating more boundaries I see around that. So I see in the workforce, someone might come and say, I feel like my value here isn't being honored or my value there isn't being honored. Connection was your point. Great. So let's create it. You're ultimately the one that's not honoring your own value. And Marissa, you have a personal experience with that where you recognized that you weren't
Mhm.
honoring a value.
Yeah, you had asked me today about, personal values in terms of do people really set their own personal values? I do have some personal values. I don't write them on a wall. I don't journal about them every day, but they're just subtle reminders for myself. And so integrity is one of them. We go back to nature and nurture. I feel like it is part of an essence of how I would describe my personality. But the nurture side is also from some lived and learned experiences. And that's why I say we might not know what that value is up front. And so I think diving into it and experiencing it, there's a great lesson that can be learned there. So a lot of people know now, I speak about it, that I worked at Theranos. And, it's a company where now the CEO, Elizabeth Holmes, is in jail. It was she scammed a lot of people out of money, put people's health at risk. Um, so for me, when I worked there, I had this intuitive feeling and suspicion that there wasn't really a product. And I was being dragged along for however many months, believing that this blood testing product existed and worked and was going to be revolutionary. At that time, it wasn't being tested on people yet. Um, but something felt off, and I just felt like I'm going to come into the office one day and everything's going to be gone and they'll have absconded with everything. And um, I knew that I could not continue as a recruiter to interview and recruit and hire people into this company, knowing how unhappy I was working there, how unhappy other people were, and not seeing the longevity of the company. Like I could not put people's well-being at risk by bringing them into the company. So for me, in reflection, that showed integrity. And when I've worked at other companies and stayed longer than I wanted to, I knew that I wasn't valuing my own value of integrity. And
Hmm.
so this has become not to say this person's good or this person's bad and how you work violates my value of integrity. It violates my own value. And so if I'm going to stay in something that I don't feel is an integrity, then I'm really just kind of abandoning myself.
So there's those violate again. And so I also see values as something that we look at to be perfect. You know, I'm either in honoring my value or I'm not honoring my value. It's a very black and white way to look at it. And then that brings us to perfection. There's a lot of good learning when you don't honor a value, I suppose. But when we think of it as I violating myself, like that just sounds so horrible. And back to the wordsmithing, do we just value
Mhm.
the words that are around it?
So
Um,
I wouldn't say like I wouldn't use the word violate to say that I violated myself.
mm,
It's more like I neglected my need.
mhm. I look at values as something that we talk about upholding things. Like, am I here to uphold these values? I look at them as honoring. I'm here to honor my personal values.
Mhm.
But when we do these value mining exercises, that feels a lot like nurture to me. Other people are in my aura. So now my ideas aren't just my own. And anytime you're starting to explore values with someone else, you're also exploring ultimately what they see and what the two of you see together. And you have just a strong connection to values your entire, like, from the minute you entered the workforce, you've known these values. I look at values as like a thread that's pulling me. And so I don't have to worry about, shouldn't say worry is probably not the right word, but like, because the values are pulling me, anytime I'm not in alignment with the value, I'll learn something and then I'll just be pulled back into my value. Like, it's not like I
Mhm.
left it, right? It's not the good or the bad or the black and the white, but so much of, well, if you look at my career, you'll see that I clearly valued supporting other people, developing them, leading them. Every single thing I've done has been that. I value integrity as well. Um, I don't like to bring people into organizations and hire people that I don't think are going to do very well. Was I out of integrity when I wasn't doing those things? I wouldn't say no. Like, the truth is, I can't predict the future. I don't know if that's going to happen. But I do see values also as being something that we have to reflect on and we have to remember and we need to go back to. We got to practice them. Values for us in our lived experience, they are who we be and they're what we do.
Yeah, and I feel like for you, it's kind of following your gut, and that's why I
I
do
do
think.
value that too, right?
Mhm.
I value that my body is guiding my decisions. And, if we'd stop telling ADHD kids to value their strategy and their plan and their processes and their toolkits. And, I see so many ADHD coaches. I'm sure they're very well meaning, but truth be told, we don't value time the same way that you value time and the way that we don't even experience time.
Yeah.
I like to think of the Chicago song. Does anyone really know what time it is? And does anyone really care? So are values worth it? Like, are values, is there even any research to show that we should be investing in personal values? Because if a company has values, for example, like, I'm a generator, 70% of us are here to respond. I can respond, those values feel really good. Or I can respond, those values don't feel very good. You're an interviewer. You're hearing people talk about their values and you're responding, that doesn't, you won't like it here, or you will.
Mhm.
So if you're just being yourself, your value. You're in your nature. You are representing your value. Um, so I would argue that what you need to do is just know yourself versus doing a value mining exercise to learn yourself. Why don't you know what your nature is versus that nurture?
Yeah, the know yourself is important, and that's why I think when I made a note to myself on, okay, well, how would I define personal values? I said that they're human qualities, and they're qualities that we find important to our own self because it basically reflects our sense of self.
Hmm. Yeah. So if you had said, Katie, I really value learning, I would say, well, let's start by learning to breathe again. And let's start by learning to play again. And let's start by learning to have more fun with the learning. It sounds very serious
Mhm.
over there with the learning. I think that's where we miss, and that's a quality, like, that's a skill maybe. And that's the other piece. Are we valuing qualities? Or are we valuing skills? And do we know the difference? Because again, if you Google value and you look at Merriam-Webster's dictionary, you're going to see a lot of it is about a fair return of equivalent in goods, a relative worth or importance, a monetary worth. What's more important than just being in the full gifts
Mhm.
that your creator gave you?
I think you just hit on something really key, which is the part of the problem is making values part of our worth. And when we're tying a value to
Mm.
our self-worth and now we're judging other people's worth based on values, I think that's part of what goes into that problem that you had talked about in and out groups.
Yeah, so that's the other thing, right? Is that all of these groups that we belong to reflect our values, but those values have out people. Those values have in people. And those values, for some reason, are in politics because we have, oh, you value this, and so therefore you're on that side, or you value this and you're on that side. I personally value, choice, resonant choice. So maybe I'm not on any side.
Mhm.
Um, but notice that that value just boxed me in to not being open to voting for anyone else except for someone that's not on the on those two sides. That um, this overemphasis on values is where we create tribal differences. And then would argue with me, well, Katie, don't we all have different values? Isn't that the point? Um, so if I'm going to have a personal value, I guess that I'd want to have a personal value that reflects all people
Mm.
and a
And that's
personal
why
value that
yeah.
reflects all people, right? Yeah, interconnectedness,
Mhm.
quantum entanglement. Energy cannot be created nor destroyed. Um, when we hate on someone else, we're hating a part of ourself because we're connected. We all have 64 strands of DNA. What you're really talking about are 64 qualities when you say values, 64 traits, 64 archetypes, like however 64 values. And so perhaps your mission is to uphold different ones than others, but to judge those other values or to somehow feel like they're not aligned, which is what we hear a lot, right? We got to align you with values. No, like I just don't, I'm not going to bring my energy to places. Like if I interviewed, I'd bring my energy to places where their values lit me up. But to compare them to my list versus their list, or to think I need to leave my job because it's not on the list, feels very word salady, boxed in,
Mhm.
boundary-ish to me.
I can see that, and that's why I think the humanness of it is important. And when I do work with corporate to work on their, core values as a company, it's, I mean, it is a marketing thing, but also I try to make them think of something that feels as universally human as possible. So if you're a tribe in another country, would you value this just like someone in Silicon Valley would? Because that's what's going to unite more
Yeah.
people.
Absolutely. But then you have that conflict of everybody in the tribe comes in with their own personal values versus saying, "Oh no, I'm here for your tribe. I'm here and so these are, we have collective values. I value your individuality. I value your individual values." Um, but again, we're back into this word salad of values versus the being. One of my favorite definitions in the dictionary on the word value is the relative duration of a musical note, a relative lightness or darkness of a color. And if we think of that as a trait, I value every trait because there is no missing piece of a puzzle on earth. Like every single puzzle piece fits. And if you look at valuing simply, I know that my energy, we talk about music frequency, like how long it lasts. I know that when my frequency is no longer playing its loud, beautiful song, that I'm probably going to start to look for other places to sing that song. But to go inside and look at values and alignment and to like fill out these things of like, how will I find the next thing with the things? Like, this is where values can be a nice compass. It's a nice language. But if the language in any way limits you, I don't see it as being very
Mhm.
useful. Or valuable. Would you buy something that limits you? I guess we do all the time, right? We buy stuff and that limits us to having a home to put it in. But if ultimately I also don't want to value myself because of integrity. I don't want to value myself for any of these nature traits. These are just the traits that I was given by God, the creator, what have you. Am I here to value those traits? I think I'm here to honor them.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing coming up is that it's you being you, it's your energy, and it's also something that should um broaden your horizons and not limit you.
Yeah. And I think values are things for us to respond to. Yes, no. We don't have to create them. We are them.
Mhm.
I had a leader that valued humility. We all valued humility. But the definition of that looked very different. Their humility was that you'll roll up your sleeves and pick up trash like I did would on the floor. Um, it's acts. Their idea of humility was acts. Um, but humility is not having to tell anybody. Sometimes humility is letting people have their story, letting people believe what they want to believe. Those are different definitions of humility. Is it an act or is it just a way of being? And I guess that's my definition of values is like it's your way of being. You honor your nature. And it's not perfection. So
Mhm.
if you feel out of touch with your nature, you can get back to your nature. But the minute we tell someone something's being violated, they feel violated. The minute you tell yourself that you feel like out of integrity, you feel usually we tend to think that's bad. How have you used
Yeah.
values to like light your way versus like keep you in the mental struggle? Because I think that's something else I see in values is that we become like we got to find them, we've got to put them to work, we've got to figure
Like
out how
finding our
like
purpose.
yes.
Well, I think
What's
this is why the compass analogy works, right? It's not a map with turn by turn directions, but it's guiding you. And you might stray or walk in different directions, but that compass leads you ultimately to whatever direction you're hoping to go in. Um Now I'm off tangent and I forgot the question.
Tell me about so you use your values as like a guiding post. I mentioned like the thread of feeling pulled.
Yeah.
Your intuition is just who you are. It's in your design, it's your personality, that clarity that you have. What I hear in
Mhm.
your career is that you've just allowed your values to open up doors and close doors.
Yes. So I'll give you an example of values and kind of priority and how I put that in check. I've definitely had jobs that didn't meet my overall, like, grander values. Like learning is one of my values. I always like to, I'm very cerebral, so think about things, learn new skills, discuss these topics with other people. And I've had jobs where I didn't learn anything. And I used to joke that my brain was going to atrophy and like I was getting stupider. But like it met like certain jobs met other things that I maybe were not a personal value, but I valued at that moment. And like moving from Australia back to the US, I had to get a home again. I had to like get certain stuff in order. So at that point, it was just about making a solid income, being able to get a mortgage, that kind of stuff. And the being inspired had to come later. And that's a quest
Mm.
that I'm still on. But it was okay to like reprioritize those values and then all of a sudden learn that, okay, I'm not meeting my value for learning in this job. I'm going to try to meet that value myself and other things. So, getting my attachment theory certification and learning about that, getting the life coaching certification, just finding ways that I could learn outside of my scope of my work. And so that was something that it's, I guess, just a quality where I could reflect back and see which values were I focusing on and which ones were I
Mm.
guess not showing up for me.
And did you find that valuable?
Yeah, I think so. I didn't have to do a worksheet on it necessarily. And, some people might have to if they don't have a lot of self awareness. But I think it was helpful for me it helps me to learn when I need to kind of pivot and change direction.
Mm. Yeah, and I think I just have always and just lived those values. The beauty of having ADHD is that I don't care about societies so much, and I'm not necessarily here. I am here to shake some shit up, so it's been easier for me. Um, but when I've made my list of values, what I've like freedom was on there, authenticity was on there. what I found the coaching and conversations to be around in the industry were on how they're being violated, how, like, as if I couldn't just make a different decision that day to uphold them. And, um, and my personal favorite piece of feedback when talking about violent boundary values that maybe I wasn't experiencing was, well, maybe it's not about you. It's my favorite piece of feedback I've ever had. Of you're right, like, um, and so that means that you're in charge. Like your values or like how you live, like that's just what you do. No one can take that away from you. No one can truly violate it. But they can show you a new path. They can show you that you're not on the right path. But when we start to box ourselves, like I think I've boxed myself in some of the value work I've done over the years because like the word humility was such a big one. I knew it was important to me. And I also had the feedback that I wasn't humble. And it felt like, like I said, it felt like something that I had to wrestle with versus just something I would be and do and move along. Marissa, if someone wants to work with you on values, you have a deep wealth of experience here. You've built amazing cultures around value. I do believe in that in a corporate culture. Like we need something to rally around is always good. Marissa, where can people find you
Mhm.
to work with you?
They can visit my website at marissasenzaki.com. And yeah, values is something that has been part of my work for a long time. I really have a gift for looking into people and figuring out what their values are in terms of their career and the work they want to do and how they want to do it, and making sure that they're going to the right job, the right career that lights them up.
Mm. And if you want to follow the podcast and Outstanding Women Leaders, we'd love to have you at Podbean, Apple Podcasts. Just follow us over on YouTube. You can follow me at alprofessionalcoaching.com. And until then, go out and live as you are and be yourself.